The silver ring caught the moonlight as Jack Morgan held it out, his weathered hands trembling not from fear of outlaws or wolves, but from the weight of asking a widow to trust again. Emily Hayes stared at the turquoise stone, remembering another promise, another ring, another man who'd left her alone in the Arizona dust. 6 months ago, she'd sworn never to love again. But that was before the stagecoach ride that changed everything, before bullets and blood proved that sometimes the greatest danger isn't losing your life, it's refusing to live it. Stay with me, friends, as I share this tale of courage and second chances. Drop a comment about where you're watching from. I love seeing how far these frontier stories travel. The August heat pressed down on the stage stop like a flat iron, baking the wooden boards until they cracked and groaned under Emily Hayes' boots. She stood at the edge of the platform, her black widow's dress absorbing the merciless sun, making her feel as though she might dissolve into the shimmering waves of heat that rose from the desert floor. 6 months. 6 months since Thomas had died in her arms, his blood seeping into the very same Arizona dirt that now stretched endlessly before her. "Ma'am, you sure about this? The station master?" A grizzled man named Pete squinted at her from beneath his sweat-stained hat. "Eastbound stage ain't due for another hour, but I got to tell you, the route through Skeleton Canyon ain't been safe lately. Apache troubles, they say, though some folks reckon it's worse than that." Emily's fingers tightened on the handle of her carpet bag, the leather worn smooth from her constant grip. Inside were all her worldly possessions. 2 dresses, a daguerreotype of Thomas, his pocket watch, and the deed to the ranch she'd sold for barely enough to buy passage back to Ohio. Back to her sister's house where she could fade into the wallpaper and pretend the frontier had never called to her, had never promised adventure, and love had never delivered death instead. "I'm sure," she said, though the words came out as dry as the dust devils spinning in the distance. "There's nothing left for me here." Pete shook his head, tobacco juice staining the corner of his mouth. "If you say so, ma'am. Though I'd wager there's nothing much waiting for you back east, neither not with that look in your eyes." Before Emily could respond, the sound of hoofbeats thundered across the desert. Not the stage, it was too early, and besides, this was a single rider approaching fast. Pete's hand moved instinctively to the shotgun propped against the wall. The rider materialized from the heat haze, like something out of a fever dream. He sat tall in the saddle, his gray duster billowing behind him, revealing glimpses of well-worn leather and iron. As he drew closer, Emily could make out sharp features weathered by wind and sun eyes the color of storm clouds, and a stillness about him that seemed at odds with the speed of his approach. He reined in his horse, a powerful black stallion that snorted and pawed at the ground and dismounted in one fluid motion. "Pete!" He nodded to the station master, then his gaze fell on Emily. For a moment something flickered in those gray eyes, something that made her heart skip in a way it hadn't for 6 long months. "Jack Morgan," Pete said by way of introduction, though his tone carried a note of surprise. "Thought you weren't due back from Tucson till tomorrow." "Plans changed," Jack said, his voice low and rough like distant thunder. He hadn't taken his eyes off Emily, and she found herself unable to look away either. "Heard there might be trouble on the eastbound route. Figured I'd ride guard." "This here's Mrs. Hayes," Pete offered. "She's taking the stage back to Ohio." Jack touched the brim of his hat. "Ma'am, long journey ahead of you." "Yes," Emily managed her throat suddenly tight. There was something about the way he looked at her, not with pity, which she'd grown accustomed to, but with a kind of understanding that made her feel exposed. "I'm aware." "You traveling alone?" The question might have sounded forward from another man, but from Jack Morgan, it carried only concern. Emily lifted her chin. "I am. Is that a problem?" A ghost of a smile crossed his features. "Not for me, ma'am. Just want to make sure you know what you're heading into. The desert don't much care about our plans." "The desert's already taken everything I had to lose Mr. Morgan." The words came out sharper than she intended, bitter as alkali water. Jack studied her for a long moment, and Emily had the unsettling feeling he could see straight through her brave facade to the shattered woman beneath. "Has it now?" he said quietly. "In my experience, folks who say that usually got more fight left in them than they think." Before Emily could respond, the stage came rattling into view, dust billowing around it like smoke from a prairie fire. The driver, a wiry man called Slim, pulled the team to a stop with practiced ease. "Afternoon, folks. Got room for passengers. In trouble, though. I'm hoping for more of the former." As the dust settled, Emily could see the coach was already occupied. A nervous-looking businessman in a checkered vest clutched a leather case to his chest, while a saloon girl with bright red hair and tired eyes fanned herself with a painted fan. In the far corner sat an older Mexican woman, her face serene despite the heat, fingers working over rosary beads. "All aboard that's going aboard," Slim called out, but Jack had already moved to Emily's side. "Allow me," he said, taking her carpetbag before she could protest. His hand brushed hers as he helped her up into the coach, and Emily felt a jolt of something not quite pain, not quite pleasure shoot through her. She settled into her seat, trying to ignore the way her pulse had quickened. Jack swung up onto the box next to Slim, his rifle across his lap, those gray eyes scanning the horizon. As the stage lurched into motion, Emily caught herself watching him through the window, noting the way he held himself alert but calm, ready for anything. "That one's trouble," the saloon girl said, following Emily's gaze. Her name was Ruby. She'd introduced herself, and despite her profession, there was a kindness in her eyes. "Jack Morgan. They say he's killed more men than the cholera, all legal-like, of course. Used to be a Texas Ranger before he came out here." "I'm not interested in Mr. Morgan or his history," Emily said stiffly. Ruby laughed a sound like broken glass wrapped in velvet. "Honey, when a woman says she ain't interested in a man like that, she's either lying or dead. And you don't look dead to me despite that widow's weeds you're wearing." Emily turned to stare out at the passing desert, determined to ignore both Ruby's knowing smile and the way her eyes kept drifting to Jack's broad shoulders. The sun was beginning its descent toward the western mountains, painting the desert in shades of gold and crimson. Soon it would be dark, and they'd be traveling through the night to make their connection in Mercy's Bend. The businessman who'd introduced himself as Mr. Cornelius Ashford cleared his throat nervously. "I say, is it true what they're saying about Skeleton Canyon, about the incidents?" "What incidents?" Emily asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to know. Ashford's face had gone pale beneath his pomade-slicked hair. 3 stages robbed in the last month, but not ordinary robberies. They say the guards were found. Well, it wasn't pleasant. And the passengers, He trailed off, sweating profusely, despite the cooling air. "Dead men tell no tales," the Mexican woman said quietly, her first word since Emily had boarded. "But the desert remembers everything." A chill ran down Emily's spine, despite the lingering heat. Through the window, she could see Jack had turned slightly, as if listening to their conversation. His hand had moved to rest on his rifle fingers, loose but ready. The sun sank lower, and the desert began to transform. What had been harsh and unforgiving in daylight became mysterious, almost beautiful in the dying light. The saguaro cacti stood like ancient sentinels, their arms raised in silent salute or warning. In the distance, a coyote howled, and its call was answered by another, then another, until the desert rang with their eerie chorus. "They're just coyotes," Ruby said, but Emily noticed she'd moved her small derringer from her purse to her lap. "Maybe," the Mexican woman said. "Maybe not. Sometimes wolves wear different skins." The stage rolled on wheels, crunching over stones and dried earth. Emily tried to doze, but every bump and jolt kept her awake, along with something else, a growing sense of unease that seemed to emanate from the very air around them. She found herself watching Jack's silhouette against the darkening sky, the way he never relaxed, never stopped scanning the horizon. It was full dark when they entered Skeleton Canyon. The walls rose up on either side like the bones of some ancient beast blocking out the stars. The only light came from the coach's lanterns, casting dancing shadows that seemed to move independently of their sources. "I don't like this," Ashford whimpered. "I don't like this at all." Emily didn't either, but she kept silent. She'd learned on the frontier that fear was like blood in the water, show it, and the sharks would come. Through the window, she could see Jack had shifted position rifle now, in his hands ready. The attack came without warning. One moment the stage was rolling along. The next gunfire erupted from the canyon walls. The horses screamed and reared as Slim fought to control them. Emily heard Jack's rifle crack once, twice, and a cry from somewhere in the darkness. "Get down!" Ruby shouted, pulling Emily to the floor of the coach. Bullets splintered the wood above their heads, showering them with fragments. Ashford was sobbing, curled into a ball, his precious leather case forgotten. The Mexican woman incredibly continued to pray, her voice steady, even as chaos erupted around them. Through the terror, Emily heard Jack's voice, calm and commanding. "Slim, keep them moving. Don't stop for anything." The stage lurched forward, picking up speed despite the treacherous path. Emily could hear horses pursuing them, the thunder of hooves mixing with gunfire. She thought of Thomas, of his last moments, and anger suddenly burned through her fear. She would not die cowering on the floor of a stagecoach. Not after surviving this long. She pulled herself up enough to peer out the window. In the moonlight, she could see riders, at least 6 of them, closing in. Jack was standing on the box firing with deadly accuracy, but he was one man against many. That's when she saw him take the hit. The bullet caught him in the shoulder, spinning him around. For a heart-stopping moment, Emily thought he would fall from the coach, but he caught himself switching his rifle to his other hand and continuing to fire. "He's hit!" Emily shouted to the others. "We're all going to be hit if they catch us," Ruby responded, but Emily was already moving. Without thinking, she grabbed Ashford's forgotten case and hurled it out the window. It struck one of the pursuing riders, knocking him from his horse. The man's scream was cut short as he hit the ground. "The lady's got spirit," she heard Slim shout, but there were still too many of them. Emily could see Jack weakening, his shots becoming less frequent. Blood was soaking through his shirt, dark in the moonlight. They were going to die here, all of them, just another tragedy in Skeleton Canyon. That's when she remembered Thomas's gun. She'd packed it at the bottom of her carpet bag, unable to leave it behind, but unable to look at it either. Now she tore through her belongings, her fingers closing around the familiar grip of the Colt .45. "What are you doing?" Ruby demanded. "Something stupid," Emily replied, checking the cylinder. 6 shots. Thomas had taught her to shoot long Sunday afternoons spent firing at bottles and cans. She'd been good at it, he'd said. A natural. She was about to find out if that was true when it mattered. She leaned out the window, the wind whipping her hair around her face. A rider was closing in on Jack's blindside, rifle raised. Emily didn't aim the way Thomas had taught her. She just pointed and fired. The man tumbled backward off his horse. Jack's head whipped around, and for an instant their eyes met. Something passed between them. Surprise, gratitude, and something else Emily couldn't name. "Keep firing!" he shouted, and Emily did. Together they held off the attackers as the stage thundered through the canyon. Emily's world narrowed to the gun in her hand, the targets in the darkness, and Jack's presence above her steady, despite his wound. She fired until the cylinder was empty, and by then they were through the narrowest part of the canyon and the attackers were falling back. "They're breaking off," Slim shouted. "We made it through." Emily slumped back into her seat, the gun falling from her numb fingers. Her hands were shaking now, adrenaline making her feel sick and alive all at once. Ruby was staring at her with something like awe. "Honey, where'd you learn to shoot like that?" "My husband," Emily said quietly. "He said a woman on the frontier should know how to protect herself." "Smart man," Ruby said. "Was he the one you're running from?" Emily shook her head. "The one I'm running from is dead. I'm running from his ghost." The Mexican woman reached over and patted Emily's hand. "The dead only have the power we give them, child. Sometimes the living need us more." As if to emphasize her point, they heard a thud from above, and Jack's voice strained now. "Slim, I need you to take the rifle. I can't." Emily was moving before he finished speaking, climbing up through the window despite Ruby's protests. The wind hit her like a physical force threatening to tear her from the coach, but she held on, pulling herself up onto the box. Jack was slumped against the rail, his face pale in the moonlight, blood soaking his entire left side. His eyes widened when he saw her. "What the hell are you doing? Get back inside." "Shut up and let me help you," Emily said, surprising herself with her vehemence. She tore at her petticoat, ripping strips of fabric. "Hold still." "Ma'am, this ain't—" "I said, shut up." She pressed the makeshift bandage against his shoulder and he hissed in pain. "I've had enough of men dying on me, Mr. Morgan. You're not adding to that count." His gray eyes searched hers, and that ghost of a smile returned. "Yes, ma'am." She worked quickly, binding the wound as best she could, while the stage rocked and swayed beneath them. Jack's blood was warm on her hands, and she fought down memories of another time, another man's blood. This was different. Jack was still breathing, still fighting. "That was some shooting back there," he said, his voice rough with pain. "You weren't doing so bad yourself," Emily replied, tying off the bandage. "We make a good team." The words hung between them, loaded with more meaning than either was ready to acknowledge. Emily became suddenly aware of how close they were, her hand still on his chest, his eyes locked on hers. "We should get you inside," she said, breaking the moment. "I need to stay up here, in case they come back." "They won't," Slim said, glancing back at them. "Not after the welcome we gave them. Besides, we're less than an hour from Miller's station. They won't follow us there." But Jack was already shaking his head, and Emily could see the movement cost him. "I stay on watch till we're safe." "Stubborn fool," Emily muttered, but she settled beside him, taking the rifle from his weak hand. "Fine, but I'm staying too. Someone needs to make sure you don't fall off." "I don't need—" "Mr. Morgan," Emily interrupted. "In the last hour I've been shot at. I've killed at least one man, and I've ruined a perfectly good petticoat on your account. The least you can do is stop arguing with me." He stared at her for a moment, then laughed a rusty sound as if he hadn't used it in a while. "You're not what I expected, Mrs. Hayes." "What did you expect?" "Another broken bird heading east to die in a cage." His good hand found hers just for a moment, warm and calloused and alive. "I was wrong." Emily felt something crack inside her chest, some wall she'd built around her heart in the months since Thomas died. It wasn't falling, not yet, but for the first time she could see light through the fissures. They rode in silence after that, but it was a comfortable silence filled with unspoken understanding. The desert rolled by endless and eternal, and Emily found herself thinking that maybe Pete had been right. Maybe there was nothing waiting for her back east. Maybe running away wasn't the answer. Miller's station appeared out of the darkness like a miracle, lanterns blazing, people rushing out to meet them. There were exclamations over the bullet holes, over Jack's wound, over the blood on Emily's hands and dress. "Raiders," Slim explained tersely, "would have had us too, if not for Jack and the lady here." Emily helped Jack down from the box, ignoring his protest that he could manage. He was heavier than she expected, solid muscle and bone, and she had to brace herself to support him. His arm around her shoulders felt strange, but not unwelcome. "There's a doctor here," someone was saying. "Get him inside." But Jack stopped at the door, turning to look at Emily. In the lamplight, she could see his face clearly for the first time, the strong jaw, the lines carved by sun and wind, the intensity in those storm-gray eyes. "Thank you," he said simply. "You would have done the same for me," Emily replied. "No," he said, and there was something profound in his voice. "I mean, thank you for reminding me that there's still something worth fighting for." Before Emily could ask what he meant, he was being led away by the doctor, and Ruby was at her elbow, guiding her to a room where she could clean up. "That man's sweet on you," Ruby said as she helped Emily wash the blood from her hands. "Don't be ridiculous. He doesn't even know me." "Honey, sometimes that's all it takes. A moment, a glance, a shared bullet wound." Ruby's smile was sad and knowing. "I've seen a lot of men, and that one looked at you like you were water in the desert." Emily wanted to protest, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, she found herself thinking of Jack's hand on hers, the weight of his arm around her shoulders, the way he'd smiled when she'd told him to shut up. "It doesn't matter," she said finally. "I'm leaving on the morning stage." "Are you now?" Ruby asked, and her tone suggested she didn't believe it for a second. The night passed slowly. Emily couldn't sleep despite the relative comfort of a real bed. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the canyon, the raiders, Jack's blood on her hands. But more than that, she saw Jack's face heard. His voice felt the strange pull she'd been trying to ignore since the moment he'd ridden up to the stage stop. She rose before dawn and dressed in her spare dress brown instead of black, though she hadn't consciously made that choice when packing. Her widow's weeds were ruined anyway, stained with blood and torn from her climb onto the stage box. The station was already stirring when she emerged. Slim was checking the horses, preparing for the next leg of the journey. The other passengers were gathering their belongings, Ashford still pale and shaky, the Mexican woman serene as ever. "Where's Ruby?" Emily asked. She decided to stay, Slim said. Said she'd had enough adventure for a while. Can't say I blame her. Emily nodded, understanding the impulse all too well. But she had a ticket, a plan, a sister waiting in Ohio. She couldn't just abandon everything because of one night, one man, one moment of connection. Could she? She was still wrestling with the question when Jack emerged from the doctor's quarters. His arm was in a sling, his face still pale, but he was on his feet, that determined set to his jaw that she was already beginning to recognize. "You shouldn't be up," she said, moving toward him without thinking. "Had to see you off," he replied, and something in his voice made her heart skip. They stood there looking at each other while the morning sun painted the desert in shades of pink and gold. Emily wanted to say something, anything, but words seemed inadequate for what she was feeling. "I wanted to give you this," Jack said, finally pulling something from his pocket with his good hand. It was a compass, brass and well-worn, the kind rangers carried. "For your journey, so you don't lose your way." Emily took it, the metal warm from his touch. "I can't accept this." "Sure you can. Call it a thank you for saving my life." "You saved mine first. Then we're even." He paused, and Emily saw him struggling with something. "Mrs. Hayes." "Emily, I know you've got your reasons for leaving. I know you've been hurt, lost someone important. I can see it in your eyes. But I also saw something else last night. I saw a woman who's still got fire in her, still got fight. Don't let that die in some parlor back east." "What are you suggesting, Mr. Morgan?" "Jack," he corrected. "And I'm not suggesting anything, just observing that the desert's got a way of calling to certain people. Maybe you're one of them." "All aboard," Slim called, and Emily knew she had to go, but her feet seemed rooted to the spot. "What will you do, shall?" she asked. "After you heal?" "Same thing I always do. Ride the routes, keep people safe. It's what I'm good at." He paused. "I'll be passing through Mercy's Bend regular-like, in case you were wondering." "I wasn't," Emily lied. "Course not." That ghost smile again. "Safe travels, Emily Hayes, whatever you decide." He touched his hat and turned away, and Emily made herself walk to the stage. But as she climbed aboard, she found herself clutching the compass like a lifeline. Through the window, she watched Jack grow smaller as the stage pulled away, but he never moved, never stopped watching until the desert swallowed him up. The rest of the journey to Mercy's Bend passed in a blur. Emily barely noticed the scenery, barely heard Ashford's nervous chatter or the Mexican woman's quiet prayers. Her mind was back at Miller's station, replaying every word, every glance, every moment. When they finally arrived in Mercy's Bend, the sun was high and merciless. The town sprawled before her, all wooden buildings and dusty streets, the kind of place that existed solely because the railroad did. The eastbound train would leave in the morning, carrying her back to Ohio, back to safety, back to a life of quiet desperation. Emily stood on the platform, carpetbag in one hand, compass in the other. Around her life went on cowboys driving cattle, women shopping for provisions, children playing in the dust. It was rough and raw and real, in a way that Ohio would never be. "You getting on or not, lady?" the porter asked, impatient. Emily looked at the train, then at the compass, then at the desert stretching endlessly to the west. She thought of Jack's gray eyes, of his steady presence, of the way she'd felt alive for the first time in 6 months when she'd been fighting beside him. She thought of Thomas, too, of what he would want for her. He'd brought her west because he'd said she belonged here, said she had a pioneer's heart. Would he want her to run back east and hide? Or would he want her to live? The answer came as clear as the desert sky. "Ma'am," the porter pressed. "No," Emily said, and the word felt like freedom. "I'm not getting on." She turned away from the train and walked into Mercy's Bend, not sure what she was doing, only knowing that she couldn't leave. Not yet. Maybe not ever. The town's hotel was a modest establishment run by a widow named Mrs. Patterson, who took one look at Emily's torn dress and blood-stained hands and asked no questions beyond whether she could pay for a room. "How long will you be staying?" Mrs. Patterson asked. Emily thought of Jack, of his promise to pass through regularly. She thought of the compass in her pocket and the crack in the wall around her heart. "I don't know," she said honestly. "Maybe a while." Mrs. Patterson smiled knowingly. It's a good town for starting over if that's what you're after. We got need of a school teacher if you're educated. The last one married a rancher and moved out to his spread. A school teacher. Emily had taught back in Ohio before marrying Thomas. It seemed like a lifetime ago, but maybe that was exactly what she needed, a way to be useful, to contribute to build something instead of running from ruins. I might be interested, she said. That night she sat in her room watching the sun set over the desert, painting the sky in shades of fire. She held Jack's compass, watching the needle point steadily north, wondering if he was out there somewhere riding guard on another stage, those gray eyes scanning the horizon for trouble. She thought about writing to her sister, explaining why she wasn't coming. But what could she say? That she'd met a man who made her feel alive again. That the desert had claimed her as surely as it had claimed Thomas, just in a different way. That she was choosing uncertainty over safety, because safety felt like death. In the end, she wrote simply, I'm staying in the West. I found something here I need to explore. Please don't worry about me. For the first time in months, I'm not worried about myself. The next morning, she presented herself to the school board, 3 stern men who seemed skeptical until she demonstrated her education and experience. They hired her on the spot, desperate for someone qualified. School starts Monday, the head of the board, Mr. Crawford, told her. Think you can be ready. I've been ready my whole life, Emily replied, and realized it was true. The days fell into a rhythm. She taught the children a mix of ranchers' kids, townspeople's offspring, and a few Mexican children whose parents worked the mines. She found lodging in a small house on the edge of town with a view of the desert that reminded her daily of her choice to stay. And she waited. Jack had said he'd pass through regularly, but he hadn't said when. Every time she heard the stage arrive, her heart would race and she'd find excuses to walk past the depot. But it was always someone else riding guard, someone else with sun-weathered features and watchful eyes. 3 weeks passed, then 4. Emily began to wonder if she'd imagined the connection between them, if she'd thrown away her chance at a safe life for a fantasy born of adrenaline and moonlight. Then on a Friday afternoon, when the children had just been dismissed and Emily was cleaning the blackboard, she heard the distinctive sound of a single rider approaching fast, just like that first day at the stage stop. She moved to the window, her heart pounding, and there he was. Jack Morgan riding his black stallion, his arm out of the sling but still held carefully. He stopped in front of the school, dismounting with that same fluid grace, and their eyes met through the glass. Emily walked out slowly, aware that half the town was probably watching. Jack removed his hat, running a hand through his dark hair, and she noticed he looked nervous. Jack Morgan, who'd faced down 6 armed raiders without flinching, looked nervous. Mrs. Hayes, he said formally, heard you decided to stay. I did, she replied, equally formal. Heard you've been recovering. I have. He paused, seeming to struggle with words. I wanted to thank you again for what you did that night. You already thanked me. You gave me a compass, remember. Did it help you find your way? Emily smiled, the first real smile she'd given anyone in months. It did. Led me right here. Something shifted in Jack's expression, hope flickering in those gray eyes. That's so. And how are you finding Mercy's Bend? It's growing on me. The children are wonderful, if a bit wild, like everything else out here. Wild things got their own kind of beauty, Jack said, and the way he was looking at her made it clear he wasn't talking about the children. They stood there, the space between them charged with possibility. Emily knew the proper thing would be to invite him in for tea, to observe the courtesies, to take things slow and careful. But when had she ever done the proper thing? She'd shot men from a moving stagecoach, for heaven's sake. Would you like to have dinner with me, Mr. Morgan? She asked, bold as brass. Jack's smile was no longer a ghost, but something full and real. I'd like that very much, Mrs. Hayes, but on one condition. What's that? You stop calling me Mr. Morgan. My name's Jack. Then you'd better call me Emily. Emily, he said, and her name on his lips sounded like a promise. That dinner was the first of many. Jack would ride into town whenever his route allowed, and they'd share meals, conversations, walks in the desert evening. He told her about his time as a Texas Ranger, about the things he'd seen and done, the reasons he'd come to Arizona to start fresh. She told him about Thomas, about their dreams and how they'd died, about why she'd almost run back east. "But you didn't," Jack pointed out one evening as they sat on her porch watching the stars emerge. "No, I didn't." "What changed your mind?" Emily considered the question. "You did. That night in the canyon when we were fighting together, I felt alive. For the first time since Thomas died, I felt like I had a purpose beyond just surviving." "You saved my life," Jack said quietly. "And you saved mine. Not just from the raiders, from myself, from giving up." Jack reached over and took her hand, his fingers intertwining with hers. "Emily, I need to tell you something. I'm not good with words, never have been, but I need you to know. I've been riding these routes for 3 years, seen a lot of people come and go. But that night when you climbed up on that box, blood on your hands and fire in your eyes, ready to fight, I knew you were different. I knew you were someone I could..." "Could what?" Emily prompted when he trailed off. "Could love." He finished the words rough but sincere. "If you'd let me." Emily felt tears prick her eyes, but they weren't tears of sadness. "Jack Morgan, are you courting me?" "I'm trying to, though I'm probably making a mess of it." "You're doing just fine," Emily assured him, squeezing his hand. "But you should know I'm not easy to love. I've got ghosts and scars, and I may never be the woman I was before." "I don't want the woman you were before," Jack said firmly. "I want the woman who stood beside me in Skeleton Canyon, the woman who chose to stay when she could have run, the woman who looks at this hard land and sees home." That night they kissed for the first time there on her porch, with the desert wind singing around them and the stars as witnesses. It was nothing like kissing Thomas had been, that had been young, love-sweet, and innocent. This was something deeper, born of loss and struggle and choice. This was two survivors finding each other in the wilderness. But their path to happiness wasn't smooth. 3 months into their courtship, Jack was ambushed on a run. Emily got word when they brought him in, more dead than alive, 3 bullet wounds, and enough blood loss to kill most men. She spent 2 days by his bedside, holding his hand, talking to him, refusing to let him slip away. The doctor said it was hopeless, but Emily had learned that hope was sometimes all you had in the desert. On the 3rd day, Jack opened his eyes. "Emily," his voice was barely a whisper. "I'm here," she said, tears streaming down her face. "Don't you dare leave me, Jack Morgan. Don't you dare." "Wouldn't dream of it," he managed. "Too stubborn to die." "Good, because I have something to tell you." "What's that?" "I love you, you fool, and if you die on me, I'll never forgive you." Jack's hand tightened on hers. "Love you too. Have since that first day, I think." His recovery was slow and painful, but Emily was there every step of the way. The town watched their romance with interest and approval, the widow and the guard, both wounded by life, finding healing in each other. But even as Jack grew stronger, Emily could see something was weighing on him. He'd grown quiet, thoughtful, and she caught him staring at her sometimes with an expression she couldn't read. Finally, on a clear night, 6 months after they'd started courting, Jack asked her to ride out into the desert with him. They went to a spot where the rocks formed a natural amphitheater and the stars seemed close enough to touch. "Emily," Jack began, and she could see his hands trembling as he reached into his pocket. "I'm not good at pretty speeches. I'm just a man who's lived rough and fought hard. But you've given me something I never thought I'd have a reason to want more than just the next day, the next ride, the next fight." He pulled out a small box and dropped to one knee there in the desert dust. "Emily Hayes, you saved my life in more ways than one. Would you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" Inside the box was a silver ring with a turquoise stone the color of the Arizona sky. Emily stared at it, remembering another proposal, another ring, another promise. But this was different. This was choice, not destiny. This was 2 people who'd walked through fire and chosen each other despite the scars. "Yes," she said, not needing to think, not needing to hesitate. "Yes, Jack. 1,000 times yes." He slipped the ring onto her finger and it fit perfectly, as if it had been waiting for her all along. When he stood and kissed her, Emily felt the last of the walls around her heart crumble. She wasn't the woman who'd stood on that platform 6 months ago ready to run. She was someone new, someone stronger, someone who'd learned that love wasn't about avoiding pain, but about finding someone worth facing it with. They were married a month later, the whole town turning out for the celebration. Ruby came back for the wedding, serving as Emily's maid of honor. "Told you that man was sweet on you," she said, helping Emily with her veil. "You were right," Emily admitted. "Honey, I'm always right about these things. You two were meant to find each other. Some folks are just written in the stars that way." As Emily walked down the aisle of the little church, she saw Jack waiting for her, tall and strong in his best suit, those gray eyes soft with love. She thought of Thomas, and for the first time the memory didn't hurt. She could almost hear him whispering his approval, telling her to be happy, to live to love again. The ceremony was simple but perfect. When the preacher pronounced them man and wife, the whole congregation erupted in cheers. These people, this town, had witnessed their journey from that first bloody night to this moment of joy. That evening, as the celebration continued around them, Jack pulled Emily aside. "I have something for you," he said, leading her to where his horse was tied. There was a second horse there, a beautiful mare with a coat like burnished copper. "She's yours," Jack said. "Figured if you're going to be a ranger's wife, you should have a proper mount." "You're still going to ride guard?" Emily asked, though she'd known this was coming. "It's what I do," Jack said. "But I'll always come home to you. Always." "I know," Emily said, and she meant it. "And sometimes maybe I'll ride with you. After all, we make a good team." Jack laughed, pulling her close. "That we do, Mrs. Morgan, that we do." As the stars came out over Mercy's Bend, Emily stood in the circle of her husband's arms, wearing the ring that caught the moonlight like captured sky. She'd come west as one man's widow and stayed as another man's wife. But more than that, she'd become herself a woman who could shoot straight, teach children, and love fearlessly, despite the risks. The desert had taken everything from her once, but it had given back so much more. It had given her Jack, yes, but also strength, purpose, and the knowledge that she could survive anything as long as she had the courage to keep riding toward the horizon. Tomorrow Jack would ride out again, guarding stages through dangerous territories, and Emily would teach her students build their home and wait for his return. But tonight they had each other and the promise of all the nights to come. In the distance, a coyote howled and Emily smiled. Once that sound had frightened her. Now it was just part of the symphony of her new life, wild and dangerous and absolutely perfect. The ring on her finger caught the light from the celebration bonfire, turquoise and silver like the desert itself. It was more than just a wedding ring. It was a symbol of everything she'd survived, everything she'd chosen, everything she'd become. She was no longer Emily Hayes, the grieving widow heading east to safety. She was Emily Morgan, wife of Jack Morgan, teacher of Mercy's Bend, and a woman who'd learned that sometimes the greatest courage isn't in running from your fears, but in standing still long enough to let love find you again. The morning after their wedding, Emily woke to find Jack already dressed, checking his rifle by the window. The early light caught the silver in his hair, and she watched him for a moment, memorizing the sight. This would be their pattern now, mornings of departure, evenings of uncertain return. "You could stay another day, she said softly, though she knew he wouldn't. Jack turned his gray eyes warm. "Got a schedule to keep, but I'll be back Friday." He crossed to the bed, sitting beside her. "You sure you're all right with this, a husband who's gone half the time?" Emily sat up, taking his face in her hands. "I knew who you were when I married you, Jack Morgan. The desert called you long before I did." He kissed her deeply, and Emily tasted promise and goodbye all at once. Then he was gone, the sound of hoofbeats fading into the morning quiet. She rose and dressed, determined not to spend her days pining. She had a life to build here, with or without Jack's constant presence. The schoolhouse became her sanctuary. The children, sensing some change in their teacher, were particularly attentive that week. Young Sarah Martinez brought her wildflowers, and Tommy Crawford actually completed his arithmetic without complaint. "Mrs. Morgan?" Sarah said, the new name still strange on everyone's lips. "My mama says you're brave for marrying Mr. Jack. She says loving a gunfighter is like trying to hold lightning." Emily smiled, though the child's words struck deep. "Your mama's wise, Sarah, but sometimes lightning is worth the risk of getting burned." 3 days into Jack's absence, a dust storm rolled in from the south. Emily was teaching geography when the sky turned brown and wind began rattling the windows. She dismissed the children early, helping the younger ones find their older siblings before the worst of it hit. Walking home through the growing tempest sand stinging her face, Emily thought of Jack somewhere out there. Was he sheltered? Was he safe? The not knowing was worse than any fear she'd felt during their canyon fight. She made it to her house just as the storm reached its full fury. Inside, she lit lamps against the unnatural darkness and tried to focus on grading papers. But her mind kept drifting to the road to the dangers that waited for lone riders in weather like this. A pounding at her door made her jump. For a wild moment, she thought it might be Jack, but when she opened it, she found Slim the stage driver, his face grim beneath its coating of dust. "Mrs. Morgan, I got news." Emily's heart stopped. "Jack?" "No, ma'am, not Jack, but there's been trouble on his route. Bandits hit the stage near Devil's Crown. They got away with the strongbox and—" He hesitated. "Tell me." "2 passengers dead. The guard too, but it weren't Jack. He traded routes with Wilson last minute, but ma'am, Jack's heading after them. Alone." Emily's relief that Jack was alive warred with fresh terror. This morning, he sent word with a rider heading back. Said to tell you not to worry, but I figured you'd want to know." After Slim left, Emily stood at her window, watching the storm rage. She thought of their wedding night, of Jack's promise to always come home. But promises were fragile things in the desert, easily broken by bullets or bad luck. That night, she didn't sleep. Every sound might be hoofbeats, every shadow might be Jack returning. When dawn came without word, she dressed and went to the schoolhouse anyway. The children needed her, and she needed the distraction. It was late afternoon when she heard a commotion in the street. She rushed to the window to see a crowd gathering near the doctor's office. Her blood turned to ice. She ran, not caring about propriety, pushing through the crowd. There was Jack's black stallion, and there, being helped down by several men, was Jack himself. He was conscious, but bloodied, his shirt torn and stained. "Jack." She was at his side in an instant. He managed a weak smile. "Hey there, schoolmarm. Sorry I'm late for supper." "You fool," she said, tears streaming down her face. "You absolute fool." As the doctor examined him, Jack told the story. He'd tracked the bandits to their hideout, an abandoned mine shaft. There'd been 4 of them, and he'd waited until dark, then gone in alone. "Got 3 of them," he said, wincing as the doctor probed a knife wound in his side. "The 4th got away, but not with the money." "You could have been killed," Emily said. "But I wasn't." He caught her hand. "I had to come back to you." The doctor's verdict was concerning the knife had gone deep, barely missing vital organs. Jack would need weeks to heal properly, and there was risk of infection. Emily made a decision then that surprised everyone, including herself. "He's coming home with me," she announced. "I'll tend to him there." "Mrs. Morgan," the doctor protested, "he needs professional care. Then you'll make house calls, but my husband recovers in his own bed, not in your back room that smells like chloroform and old blood." Jack looked at her with something like awe. "Emily, you don't have to—" "Hush, you're in no position to argue." She arranged for men to carry him to their house, then set about transforming their bedroom into a sick room. She'd nurse Thomas through his final hours. She'd be damned if she couldn't nurse Jack back to health. The first days were the worst. Fever set in, and Jack thrashed in delirium, calling out warnings to invisible enemies reaching for guns that weren't there. Emily bathed his burning skin with cool water, forced medicine between his cracked lips, and talked to him constantly, anchoring him to the world with her voice. "You listen to me, Jack Morgan," she said, during the worst night when his breathing was shallow and the doctor had given her a look that said to prepare herself. "You survived the Texas Rangers. You survived Skeleton Canyon. You survived 3 bullets just months ago. You're not dying from 1 knife wound, not on my watch." On the 4th day, the fever broke. Jack opened clear eyes to find Emily slumped in a chair beside the bed, still in the same dress she'd worn for 3 days, her hand clasping his. "Emily," he whispered. She jerked awake. "Jack, oh, thank God." "How long, Batsunk?" 4 days. You've been fighting demons only you could see." He squeezed her hand weakly. "Not demons. Just memories." but your voice kept calling me back." As Jack recovered, Emily discovered a side of marriage she hadn't expected. With Thomas, she'd been young and dependent, following his lead. With Jack, she was an equal partner. She managed their finances while he was bedridden, dealt with the bank about the reward money for recovering the stolen strongbox, and even faced down 2 members of the remaining bandits' gang who came sniffing around. She'd been alone in the house when they appeared, Jack sleeping upstairs. 2 rough men with mean eyes and hands that hovered near their guns. "Heard Jack Morgan lives here," one said, spitting tobacco juice off the porch. "He does," Emily replied, Thomas's Colt hidden in the folds of her skirt. "He's the one killed our friends." "Your friends were murderers and thieves." The man's face darkened. "Maybe we should teach Morgan a lesson through his pretty wife." Emily pulled the gun smoothly, cocking it in the same motion. "Maybe you should walk away while you still can." They laughed, but she saw uncertainty in their eyes. "You won't shoot." "I shot 3 men from a moving stagecoach in the dark." "You're standing still in broad daylight." "Want to test your luck." They must have heard something in her voice, seen something in her eyes, because they backed away slowly. "This ain't over," one warned. "It is if you're smart," Emily replied, keeping the gun steady until they mounted their horses and rode off. When she went back inside, she found Jack at the top of the stairs, pale and shaking his own gun in his hand. "You should be in bed," she scolded, helping him back to their room. "Heard voices. Thought you were in trouble." "I handled it." Jack looked at her with that mixture of pride and concern she was getting used to. "You're becoming quite the frontierswoman, Mrs. Morgan." "I had a good teacher," she replied, but they both knew it was more than that. The desert was changing her, hardening her in some ways, softening her in others. She was becoming who she was meant to be. 2 weeks into his recovery, Jack grew restless. Emily would find him attempting to clean his guns or trying to walk farther than the doctor recommended. She understood the feeling. He was a man of action trapped in an inactive body. "Tell me about Texas," she said one evening, trying to distract him from his frustration. Jack was quiet for a long moment. "Not much to tell. Joined the Rangers when I was 18. Thought I was saving the world." "What changed?" "Found out the world didn't want saving, just wanted to survive." He stared at the ceiling. "There was a woman before, Maria, Mexican rancher's daughter. I loved her, or thought I did." Emily felt a stab of jealousy but kept quiet. "Rangers hit her father's ranch, said he was harboring bandits, but really they just wanted the land. I tried to stop it, but..." He trailed off. "She died in the crossfire. Her last words were that she forgave me, but I never forgave myself. Left Texas that night, never went back." Emily took his hand. "Is that why you ride guard? Trying to protect people, make amends?" "Maybe. Or maybe I'm just running same as you were." "We're not running now," Emily said firmly. "We're building something." Jack turned to look at her. "What are we building, Emily?" "A life, a future, maybe even a family someday." The word hung between them, loaded with possibility. Jack pulled her down for a kiss. "I'd like that," he said against her lips. "I'd like that very much." As Jack grew stronger, they began taking walks in the evening, short at first, then longer. The town watched their progress with interest and approval. The widow and the gunfighter had become something else, a symbol of hope, of second chances. One evening they encountered Mrs. Patterson from the hotel. "You two give the rest of us hope," she said. "Proof that happiness can find you even in the hardest places." But not everyone was happy about their union. The 2 bandits Emily had faced down were still in town watching, waiting. Jack knew it. Emily knew it. The whole town knew it. The tension grew like a storm building on the horizon. It came to a head on a Saturday afternoon. Jack was finally well enough to return to limited duty, checking weapons at the stage depot. Emily was at the general store when she heard the shouting. She ran toward the sound, finding a crowd gathered in the street. In the center stood Jack, facing the 2 bandits. Both had their hands near their guns, but neither had drawn yet. "Been waiting for you to get back on your feet, Morgan," one said. "Wouldn't be sporting to kill a man in his sickbed." "Appreciate the courtesy," Jack replied, his voice calm. "But you boys should have taken your chance when you had it. Your woman threatened us." "My woman doesn't make threats. She makes promises. Emily pushed through the crowd. Jack, stay back, Emily. His voice was sharp, commanding, and she stopped. This was his world, his rules. 2 against 1. Someone in the crowd muttered. That ain't fair. Life ain't fair, the second bandit said. Morgan knows that. Jack stood relaxed, his hand loose at his side. Emily had seen him practice his draw, knew how fast he could be, but he'd been wounded, weak. Was he recovered enough? You boys sure you want to do this? Jack asked. You can walk away. Leave town, don't come back, and this ends here. Our friends are dead because of you. Your friends are dead because they chose to be killers. Same choice you're making now. The moment stretched taut as wire. Emily couldn't breathe, couldn't think. She saw the telegraph operator's boy running, probably to fetch the sheriff. But he'd be too late. These things happen fast. The first bandit went for his gun. Jack's draw was liquid lightning so fast Emily almost missed it. His gun fired twice before either bandit cleared leather. Both men crumpled to the dust, their weapons falling unfired from dead hands. The crowd was silent for a moment, then someone started clapping. Others joined in, and Jack holstered his gun with a look of disgust. Nothing to celebrate, he said. Just more blood in the dust. He walked to Emily, his face hard. You shouldn't have come. You're my husband. Where else would I be? His expression softened slightly. Let's go home. As they walked away, Emily noticed his hand trembling slightly. The confrontation had taken more out of him than he'd shown. She slipped her arm through his, supporting him without making it obvious. You didn't have a choice, she said quietly. There's always a choice. Sometimes they're all bad, but there's always a choice. That night, Jack was quiet, staring out the window at the desert. Emily knew he was thinking about the men he'd killed, adding them to whatever tally he kept in his head. How do you do it? She asked. How do you carry the weight of it? By remembering why, he said. Those men would have hurt you, hurt others. Sometimes the only way to protect good people is to stop bad ones. Thomas used to say something similar. He said the frontier needed rough men to make it safe for civilization. Smart man, you're Thomas. He was, but he's gone and you're here and I need you to stay here. No more running off alone after bandits. No more trading your life for others. You have someone to come home to now. Jack turned from the window, pulling her into his arms. I know. It changes everything having you. Makes me more careful, but also more determined. I've got something to protect now, something worth everything. The weeks that followed were peaceful. Jack returned to his routes, but only the safer ones, and often with backup. Emily continued teaching, and their life found a rhythm. In the evenings, they'd sit on their porch watching the sun paint the desert in shades of gold and crimson. The town began to look to them as unofficial leaders. When disputes arose, people would ask Jack's opinion. When children were sick, mothers would seek Emily's advice. They were becoming pillars of the community, their violent courtship transforming into stable partnership. One day, Ruby returned to town, this time to stay. She'd saved enough to open a boarding house, a respectable establishment, she emphasized. She and Emily renewed their friendship, and Ruby often joined them for dinner. You two give me hope, Ruby said one evening. If a widow and a gunfighter can find happiness, maybe there's hope for a retired saloon girl. There's hope for everyone, Emily said. The desert doesn't care about your past, only your courage. Speaking of courage, Ruby said with a sly smile, when are you two going to give this town some little Morgans to teach and protect? Emily blushed, but Jack reached over and took her hand. When the time's right, he said, and Emily heard promise in his voice. That night, as they lay in bed, Jack turned to her. Did you mean what you said before, about a family? Yes, Emily said simply. Did you? More than anything, I want to build something that lasts, Emily. Something beyond just survival. Then we will, she said, kissing him. We'll build it together. The next morning brought unexpected news. A letter arrived from Ohio from Emily's sister. Their mother was ill, possibly dying. She begged Emily to come home to say goodbye. Emily stared at the letter, torn between duty to family and her new life. Jack found her crying at the kitchen table. What is it? He read the letter, then pulled her into his arms. You should go. I can't leave you. I'll come with you. Emily pulled back to look at him. You in Ohio. Why not about time I saw where you came from? Besides, I'm not letting you travel that far alone. The decision made, they prepared for the journey. The whole town seemed to turn out to see them off. The children from Emily's school brought flowers and drawings. The sheriff shook Jack's hand and told him to hurry back. Don't let those soft Easterners ruin you, Slim called out as they boarded the stage that would take them to the railroad. The journey east was a reversal of Emily's flight west. Each mile took them further from the desert, from the life they'd built. The landscape changed from brown to green, from open to closed, from wild to tamed. Jack grew increasingly uncomfortable as they moved into settled territory. In the cities, he kept his hand near his gun, eyeing the crowds with suspicion. Emily found herself equally displaced. The woman who'd once belonged here no longer fit. Ohio was green and soft and strange. Emily's childhood home seemed smaller than she remembered, the rooms cramped and dark. Her mother, wasted by illness, barely recognized her. Emily, is that you? But you're so different. I am different, Mother. Her sister Margaret was scandalized by everything: Emily's sun-darkened skin, her calloused hands, and especially Jack with his guns and his watchful eyes. You married a gunfighter, Margaret whispered, horrified. I married a good man who happens to be good with a gun, Emily corrected. But Emily, you could have stayed here, been safe. Safe isn't living, Margaret. It's just existing. Jack, meanwhile, was trying his best to fit in. He'd bought a suit, left his guns at their hotel, and attempted polite conversation. But Emily could see he was dying inside like an eagle caged. One evening, while Emily sat with her mother, Jack escaped to the garden. She found him later standing under an apple tree, looking lost. I don't belong here, he said. Neither do I, not anymore. Your family needs you. My family is you, Emily said firmly. This is my past. You're my future. Her mother died 3 days later, peacefully in her sleep. Emily grieved, but it was a clean grief, uncomplicated by regret. She'd said goodbye, made peace, closed that chapter of her life. After the funeral, Margaret tried one more time. Stay, Emily. You could teach here, be respectable. I am respectable. I'm a teacher in Mercy's Bend, wife to an honorable man, member of a community that values courage over convention. That's more respectable than hiding in a parlor afraid of life. They left the next day, and Emily saw Jack come alive again as they moved west. By the time they reached Arizona, he was himself again, and so was she. Their return to Mercy's Bend was triumphant. The town welcomed them back with genuine joy. Emily's students had made a banner, "Welcome home, Mrs. Morgan." It's good to be home, Emily said, and meant it. This was home now, this rough town on the edge of nowhere, these people who'd become family. That night, as they lay in their own bed again, Jack said, "Thank you for coming back. Where else would I go? This is where I belong, with you in the desert building our life." Our life, Jack repeated and smiled. I liked the sound of that. Outside, a coyote howled, and Emily smiled too. The sound that had once frightened her, then comforted her, now simply was part of the rhythm of their world, wild and dangerous, and theirs. The ring on her finger caught the moonlight through the window, turquoise and silver, a promise kept and renewed daily. She thought of the journey that had brought them here, the midnight ride through Skeleton Canyon, the blood and bullets, the choices made in moments of crisis. But mostly, she thought of tomorrow. Tomorrow she would teach her students. Jack would ride his routes. They would build their life together day by day in this place where second chances bloomed like desert flowers after rain. The past was done. The future was unwritten, and the present, this moment, this man, this life was everything she'd never known she wanted, everything she'd been brave enough to choose. In the darkness, Jack's hand found hers, and Emily held on tight. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The widow and the gunfighter had become something more. They'd become hope itself, proof that love could grow even in the harshest ground if you had the courage to plant it and the strength to make it bloom. The autumn rains came early that year, transforming the desert into something Emily had never seen before. The dusty browns and grays erupted with color as dormant seeds sprouted, painting the landscape in unexpected purples and yellows. She stood at her classroom window watching the transformation, one hand resting on her stomach, where a secret had been growing for 2 months now. She hadn't told Jack yet. Part of her wanted to be certain to wait until the danger of early loss had passed. But another part, the part that had learned to read her husband's moods like weather signs, knew he'd already sensed something different about her. That evening, he confirmed her suspicions. They were sitting on the porch watching the rain clouds build over the mountains when he said quietly, "You've got something to tell me." It wasn't a question. Emily turned to look at him, this man who could track outlaws through bare rock, but handled her with such gentleness. "How did you know you've been different, careful, the way you move, the way you've been looking at me when you think I'm not watching?" He paused, those gray eyes intense. "Emily, are you?" "I'm carrying our child," she said, the words feeling strange and wonderful on her tongue. The doctor confirmed it yesterday. Jack went absolutely still, the kind of stillness that usually preceded violence. But when he moved, it was to pull her carefully into his arms, his face buried in her hair. She felt him trembling. "Jack, I never thought—" His voice was rough with emotion. "After Maria, after everything, I never thought I'd have this chance." "Are you happy?" He pulled back to look at her, and his eyes were bright with unshed tears. "Happy doesn't begin to cover it. Terrified might be closer." Emily laughed, understanding completely. A man who faces down bandits without blinking is scared of a baby. Bandits are simple. You shoot them or they shoot you. A baby, a family. That's complicated. That's everything. The news changed the rhythm of their lives. Jack became almost comically protective, trying to carry everything for her, watching her like she might shatter. Emily found it both endearing and exasperating. "I'm pregnant, not made of glass," she told him one morning when he tried to prevent her from lifting a stack of books. "Those are heavy. They're primers for 6-year-olds. Still." But beneath his overprotectiveness, Emily saw something deeper. Jack was transforming before her eyes, from a man who'd lived day to day into someone planning for the future. He started taking only the safest routes, began putting money aside, even talked about adding a room to their house. The town's reaction was joyful. Mrs. Patterson immediately began knitting baby blankets, and the Mexican women from the church started planning a celebration. Even crusty old Slim got emotional when he heard. "About time this town had some good news," he said, blinking suspiciously bright eyes. "Been too much dying around here. We need some living." But not everyone was pleased. 3 weeks after Emily's announcement, trouble rode into town in the form of Marcus Wade, a man from Jack's past. Emily was teaching when she saw him through the window, tall and lean, wearing 2 guns and a smile that never reached his eyes. She dismissed the children early, sensing trouble the way animals sense storms. By the time she reached the main street, Wade had found Jack outside the sheriff's office. "Jack Morgan," Wade called out, his voice carrying across the dusty street. "Been a long time." Jack turned slowly, and Emily saw recognition followed by resignation cross his features. "Marcus, thought you were dead. Takes more than Mexican bullets to kill me, though I hear you've gone soft. Playing house with a school teacher. What do you want, Wade?" "What I've always wanted. To settle our score." Emily didn't know what score they meant, but she could read the situation. This wasn't random. Wade had come specifically for Jack, and he'd come to kill. Sheriff Thompson stepped forward. "There'll be no trouble in my town, Wade." Wade laughed an ugly sound. "No trouble, Sheriff. Just 2 old friends catching up. Right, Jack?" "We were never friends," Jack said flatly. "No, we weren't. But we were partners once, until you developed a conscience and left me to die in Sonora. You were massacring civilians. I was following orders, something you used to understand before you went noble." Emily moved closer despite knowing Jack would want her to stay away. Wade's eyes flicked to her, taking in her condition with a knowing smirk. "Ah, the school teacher. And breeding, too. How domestic." He looked back at Jack. "Makes a man vulnerable having something to lose." "Makes a man dangerous, but," Jack corrected, his hand resting on his gun, "having something to protect." The tension stretched between them like a taut rope. The street had emptied, people sensing violence the way they'd sense a rattlesnake. "Tomorrow," Wade said finally. "Noon. We settle this like men, not like the animals we used to be. I don't do that anymore. You will. Or I'll make this town very uncomfortable. Starting with that pretty school. Be a shame if it burned down, with or without children inside. Jack's face went dark with rage, but Emily stepped forward before he could respond. You're threatening children, Wade tipped his hat mockingly. I'm suggesting that Jack and I have business to conclude. How it gets concluded is up to him. He turned and walked away, leaving silence in his wake. Jack stood rigid fury radiating from him in waves. We could arrest him, the sheriff suggested, for the threats. On what evidence? He's too smart for that. Jack's voice was bitter. He knows exactly what he's doing. That night, Emily found Jack cleaning his guns with methodical precision. She'd seen him prepare for danger before, but this was different. This had the feeling of a last time. Tell me about Sonora, she said. Jack's hand stilled. It was a lifetime ago. I was a different man. But Wade wasn't. Wade was always exactly what he is now. A killer who enjoys it. I just didn't see it until Sonora. He set down the gun, staring at his hands. We were hired to protect a silver shipment. Turned out the people trying to take it were just farmers desperate starving. Their land had been stolen by the company we were working for. What happened? Wade wanted to make an example, started killing them even after they surrendered. Women, children. I tried to stop him. We fought, and I left him wounded when the federales came. Thought he died in prison. You did the right thing. Did I? If I'd killed him, then he wouldn't be here now threatening you, threatening our child. Emily took his face in her hands, forcing him to look at her. You're not a murderer, Jack. That's what separates you from him. Tomorrow I might have to be. Then tomorrow you will be. But tonight you're my husband, the father of our child, and the best man I know. They made love that night with desperate tenderness, both aware it might be their last time. Emily tried to memorize everything, the scent of him, the feel of his hands, the way he whispered her name like a prayer. Morning came too soon. The whole town knew what was happening. Emily could feel the tension as she walked to the school. She tried to teach, but the children were distracted, picking up on the adults' anxiety. At 11:30, she dismissed them. Go straight home, she told them, and they scattered like startled birds. By noon, the main street was deserted except for the two men standing 40 feet apart. Jack had positioned himself with the sun at his back, an old gunfighter's trick. Wade stood loose and ready, that cruel smile playing on his lips. Emily watched from the sheriff's office, Thompson beside her. Jack's fast, the sheriff said, trying to reassure her. Fastest I've ever seen. Wade's faster, said a voice behind them. They turned to find Ruby, her face grave. I knew him in Tombstone. He's killed 17 men in fair fights. Never lost. Emily's heart clenched, but she kept her face calm. Through the window, she could see Jack steady as granite, no sign of fear or doubt. You sure you want to do this? Wade called out. You've got a lot to lose now, Jack. That pretty wife, that baby she's carrying, walk away and they get to keep their husband and father. You threatened them, Jack replied, his voice carrying clearly. That was your mistake. My only mistake was not killing you in Sonora. No, Jack said. Your mistake was thinking I'm the same man I was then. That man might have hesitated. This one won't. Wade's smile faltered slightly. Something in Jack's voice and his stance was different from what he'd expected. Draw whenever you're ready, Jack said, and his calmness was more frightening than any threat. Wade went for his gun. What happened next was too fast for Emily to fully follow. Both men drew the reports of their guns so close together they sounded like one shot. For a heartbeat, both stood frozen. Then Wade looked down at the spreading red stain on his chest, surprise replacing arrogance on his face. You weren't that fast before. I wasn't a father before, Jack said quietly. Wade fell forward into the dust, his gun sliding from lifeless fingers. Jack stood for a moment longer, then his left arm dropped to his side, blood seeping between his fingers. Emily was running before Wade hit the ground, reaching Jack as his knees buckled. How bad? Just a graze, he said, though his face was pale. His aim was off. Mine wasn't. The doctor confirmed Jack's assessment. The bullet had carved a groove along his ribs, painful but not dangerous. As he was being bandaged, the sheriff approached. "It was a fair fight. Everyone saw. Wade drew first." Jack nodded, his eyes finding Emily's. "It's done. That part of my life is finished now. All of it." That night, as they lay in bed, Emily felt the baby move for the first time. She gasped, grabbing Jack's hand and placing it on her stomach. "There," she whispered. "Did you feel it?" Jack's eyes widened as he felt the flutter of movement. "That's our child." "That's our future," Emily corrected. "Wade was your past. This is what matters now." Jack pulled her close, careful of both their wounds, his physical, hers emotional. "I love you, Emily Morgan. You and this baby are everything, everything." The months that followed were peaceful. Jack kept his word, taking no more dangerous routes, focusing instead on helping the sheriff keep order in town. Emily continued teaching until her condition made it impossible, then found herself restoring their home for the baby's arrival. Ruby had become her closest friend, helping with preparations and sharing sometimes scandalous stories of her past. "You know what I love about you and Jack?" she said one afternoon while helping Emily sew baby clothes. "You both chose each other, not because it was easy or expected, but because you recognized something in each other worth fighting for." "We almost didn't," Emily admitted. "I almost got on that train." "But you didn't. That's what matters. The choices we make, not the ones we almost make." Winter came gentle that year, bringing cool relief rather than harsh cold. Emily grew round with child, and Jack grew more protective and tender. He'd taken to talking to her belly in the evenings, telling the baby stories of the desert of courage and survival. "You're filling our child's head with adventure before they're even born," Emily teased. "Just want them to know where they come from. This land, these people, this story of ours." Dr. Harrison had warned them that first babies could be difficult, especially for women Emily's age. But when labor came on a clear February morning, Emily felt ready. She'd survived bandits and gunfights, widowhood, and renewal. She could survive this too. Jack, however, was a wreck. The man who'd faced down killers without flinching paced their bedroom like a caged wolf, while Emily labored Mrs. Patterson and the midwife attending her. "You need to calm down," Emily told him between contractions. "You're making me nervous." "I should do something, get water, boil something. Isn't that what people do?" "People who aren't Jack Morgan, maybe. You just stand there and let me hold your hand." For 16 hours she labored. Jack never left her side, letting her grip his hand hard enough to leave bruises, whispering encouragement when she thought she couldn't continue. "You're the strongest woman I know," he said as she struggled through another contraction. "You can do this." "I'm scared," she admitted the first time she'd said it aloud. "So am I. But we're scared together. That makes us brave." As dawn broke on the second day, their child entered the world with a cry that Jack would later swear was the most beautiful sound he'd ever heard. A daughter, perfect and pink and furious at the disruption. "A girl," the midwife announced, placing the baby in Emily's exhausted arms. Emily looked down at this tiny person they'd created, overwhelmed by a love so fierce it took her breath away. "She's beautiful." Jack was crying openly, unashamed. He touched the baby's cheek with one calloused finger, infinitely gentle. "She's perfect, just like her mother." "What should we name her?" Emily asked. Jack thought for a moment. "Hope. Because that's what she is. Hope for the future, for second chances, for everything." "Hope Morgan," Emily said, testing the name. "I like it." The town celebrated Hope's arrival as if she were everyone's child. Gifts poured in, blankets, clothes, toys carved by local craftsmen. Even Slim, gruff as ever, went soft when he held her. "Gonna be a heartbreaker, this one," he predicted. "Got her mama's spirit and her daddy's stubbornness." As Emily recovered, she watched Jack with their daughter, marveling at the transformation. The gunfighter had become something she'd never imagined, a devoted father who could change diapers as efficiently as he could clean a rifle, who sang lullabies in his rough voice, who looked at their child like she was a miracle. One evening, when Hope was 3 months old, Emily found Jack on the porch, the baby sleeping in his arms, both of them watching the sunset. "What are you thinking?" she asked, settling beside them. "About how I got here. From that angry young man in Texas to this. It doesn't seem possible." "The desert changes people," No, Jack said, looking at her with those storm-gray eyes that still made her heart race. You changed me. You and this little one. You gave me something I never thought I'd have a reason to be better than I was. Emily leaned into him, careful not to disturb Hope. We saved each other. That we did, as if sensing the importance of the moment. Hope opened her eyes, her father's gray eyes, and made a satisfied sound before settling back to sleep. The stars came out brilliant in the clear desert sky. Emily thought about the journey that had brought them here, the fear, the violence, the choices made in darkness and light. Every moment had led to this, a family forged in the crucible of the frontier, stronger for having been tested. No regrets, Jack asked quietly. Not one, Emily replied, and meant it. The desert wind sang around them, carrying the scent of sage and possibility. Inside their home was warm and safe, filled with the artifacts of the life they'd built. Books and guns, baby clothes and spurs, all the contradictions that made their love story unique. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges. Hope would grow. The town would change. The desert would continue its eternal cycle of harsh and gentle. But tonight they had this perfect moment, the three of them together, proof that sometimes the most beautiful things grow in the most unlikely places. Jack shifted Hope to one arm and pulled Emily closer with the other. I love you, he said simply. Both of you. More than I have words for. We know, Emily replied, her hand resting over his heart. We've always known. In the distance, a coyote howled and another answered, but Hope didn't stir, safe in her father's arms, surrounded by the love that had conquered death and distance to create her. The ring on Emily's finger caught the starlight, turquoise and silver, like a piece of the desert sky. She remembered the day Jack had given it to her, nervous and hopeful, offering not just a ring, but a future neither had dared imagine. Now that future was here, sleeping peacefully, breathing promise into the night air. The widow and the gunfighter had become parents, their violent love story transformed into something tender and lasting. Tell me a story, Emily said, settling deeper into Jack's embrace. What kind of story? Our story. So I never forget how we got here. Jack smiled, pressing a kiss to her hair. Well, it started with a woman in a black dress standing at a stage stop, thinking her life was over. As he spoke, weaving their history into words their daughter would someday want to hear, Emily closed her eyes and listened. The story was dramatic and dangerous, full of bullets and blood, but it was also beautiful proof that love could bloom anywhere, even in the killing ground of the desert, especially there where only the strongest things survived. The night deepened around them, but they stayed on the porch. The three of them writing the next chapter of their story with every breath, every heartbeat, every moment of chosen courage. They'd started as strangers thrown together by circumstance and had become something unbreakable, a family built on the bones of their former selves, rising from the ashes of loss into something new and fierce and wonderful. Hope's first birthday came with an unseasonable storm that turned the desert into a sea of mud. Emily watched from the window as Jack struggled to secure their chicken coop against the wind, his figure blurred by sheets of rain. In her arms, Hope babbled contentedly, unaware that the storm would bring more than just water to their dry land. The knock at the door came just as Jack returned, soaked to the skin. Emily opened it to find a woman standing there, elderly but straight-backed, her expensive dress ruined by rain and travel dust. Behind her stood a younger man in a city suit holding a leather case. I'm looking for Jack Morgan, the woman said, and something in her voice made Emily's stomach tighten. Jack appeared behind Emily, water still dripping from his hair. He went rigid when he saw the woman. Mother. The word hung in the air like a challenge. Emily had never heard Jack mention his mother, had assumed she was dead like so many other pieces of his past. But here she stood very much alive, her gray eyes, Jack's eyes, taking in the modest home with obvious disapproval. Jackson, she said, using a name Emily had never heard. It's been 12 years. What are you doing here? Jack's voice was flat, controlled in a way that meant danger. May we come in? My companion and I have traveled a very long way. Emily, ever the hostess, despite her shock, stepped aside. Of course, please come in. I'll make coffee. The woman entered, her gaze falling on Hope. Something flickered in those stern eyes. "This is your child." "My daughter," Jack said, taking Hope from Emily protectively. "Hope! Hope!" the woman repeated. "How optimistic." The younger man cleared his throat. "Perhaps I should introduce myself. I'm Mr. Garrett, Mrs. Morgan's attorney." "Attorney?" Emily asked, but Jack was already shaking his head. "Whatever you're selling, we're not interested." "Jackson," his mother said sharply, "you could at least hear me out before rejecting what I've come to offer. The last offer you made me was to forget Maria existed and marry the governor's daughter. I wasn't interested then, and I'm not interested now." Emily saw the woman flinch at Maria's name. "That was a long time ago. Things have changed." "Have they? You still look at my wife and see someone beneath you. You still think money solves everything." "Your father is dead," she said bluntly. Jack stilled. "When 6 months ago, his heart." She paused, composing herself. "He left you everything, Jackson. The ranch, the investments, all of it. Against my wishes, I might add, but his will was very specific." Mr. Garrett opened his case, pulling out documents. "The estate is considerable, nearly $300,000 plus 4,000 acres of prime Texas rangeland." Emily gasped. It was more money than she could imagine, enough to transform their lives completely. But Jack's face showed no pleasure, only a deep old anger. "He can keep it or burn it. I don't care." "Don't be a fool," his mother snapped. "You have a family now, a child. Would you deny them comfort out of pride?" "I'd deny them the poison that comes with Morgan money," Jack replied. "I know what it costs. I've seen what it buys." Hope started crying, sensing the tension. Emily took her, bouncing her gently while her mind raced. This was Jack's mother, Hope's grandmother, but the chasm between them seemed unbridgeable. "Perhaps," Emily said carefully, "we should all sit down and discuss this calmly." Jack's mother turned to her, really looking at her for the first time. "You must be the school teacher, the widow." "I'm Jack's wife," Emily said firmly. "Emily Morgan." "Yes, I'd heard. After that Mexican girl died, I thought Jackson might come to his senses. Instead, he found another inappropriate attachment." The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Jack stepped forward, putting himself between his mother and Emily. "You need to leave. Now." "I'm trying to help you, Jackson." "No, you're trying to control me, same as always. But I'm not that boy anymore, Mother. I'm not someone you can shape to fit your expectations." "You're my son." "I stopped being your son the day you celebrated Maria's death." The words hung in the air like a physical blow. His mother's composed mask cracked, showing something raw underneath. "I never celebrated. You said it was for the best. You said I was well rid of her." "She wasn't suitable. She was carrying my child." Jack's voice broke the dam of his control. "My child, your grandchild, and you called it a blessing that they died." Emily felt the world shift. Jack had never mentioned a child, never said Maria had been pregnant. She held Hope tighter, understanding now the fierce protection he showed their daughter. His mother had gone pale. "I didn't know about the child. You never said. Would it have mattered? Would you have seen a half-Mexican grandchild as anything other than an embarrassment?" The silence stretched, answer enough. Finally, his mother straightened, rebuilding her walls. "The offer stands. The inheritance is yours whether you want it or not. Mr. Garrett will leave the papers." She moved toward the door, then stopped, looking back at Hope. "She has the Morgan eyes." "She has her mother's heart," Jack said. "That's what matters." His mother left without another word, Mr. Garrett scrambling to follow. The door closed behind them, leaving the small family in echoing silence. Jack slumped into a chair, head in his hands. Emily had never seen him look so defeated, not even when he'd been wounded. "You never told me about the baby," she said gently. "I couldn't. It hurt too much." He looked up, eyes haunted. "She was 3 months along when the Rangers came. The stress, the violence. She lost the baby 2 days before she died. My mother's response was the last straw. I left that night, left everything behind." Emily knelt beside him, Hope still in her arms. "I'm sorry. I thought I'd buried it all, but seeing her, hearing her dismiss you the same way she dismissed Maria," he touched Hope's cheek. I won't let her poison this. What we have is clean Emily. It's ours. The money could help the town, Emily pointed out carefully. We could build a proper school, a hospital. Blood money. Money that could do good, transform it from something ugly into something beautiful. She paused. Isn't that what we've done with our lives? Taken the broken pieces and built something new. Jack looked at her for a long moment. When did you become so wise? When I married a complicated man with a gift for redemption. That night, after Hope was asleep, they went through the papers Garrett had left. The numbers were staggering, the property vast. Jack's father had built an empire, and now it was all Jack's. We could just take part of it, Emily suggested, enough to help the town set up Hope's future. Once you take any of it, you're beholden. That's how they work. Or, Emily said carefully, you take all of it and use it your way. Your father's gone Jack. This isn't about him or your mother anymore. It's about what you choose to do with what's been given. Jack was quiet for a long time, staring at the papers. Finally, he said, I need to think. He stood abruptly. I'm going for a ride. Emily watched him go, knowing he needed space to wrestle with his demons. She understood the weight of the past, how it could chain you even when you thought you were free. He was gone for 3 hours. Emily had just started to worry when she heard his horse returning. He came in windblown and clear-eyed, some decision reached in his solitary communion with the desert. We'll take it, he said, but on our terms. The money goes into trust for the town and Hope. The ranch, he paused. The ranch becomes a place for second chances, for people like us who need to start over. Emily threw her arms around him. You're sure? My father built his empire on taking. Maybe it's time a Morgan built something on giving. The transformation of their lives didn't happen overnight. There was legal work, travel to Texas to see the property arrangements to be made. But within 6 months, the changes were visible. Mercy's Bend had a new school built of brick with real glass windows and books from San Francisco. They'd hired 2 more teachers, expanded to include older students. The ranch in Texas became what Jack envisioned, a place where broken people could heal. Former soldiers, widows, orphans, anyone who needed shelter and a new start. Jack hired good people to run it, visiting regularly to ensure his vision was maintained, but not everyone was happy with the changes. Progress brought its own problems, and soon Mercy's Bend attracted attention from those who saw opportunity in its growth. The Carlson brothers arrived on a Tuesday. 3 men with sharp suits and sharper smiles. They bought drinks for everyone in the saloon, spoke of bringing the railroad through town, of the prosperity it would bring. We'll need investors, of course, the eldest William Carlson said smoothly, and certain accommodations for the workers. Emily, who'd been shopping at the general store, overheard the conversation. She knew what accommodations meant: saloons, gambling halls, the kind of establishments that turn towns into hellholes. That evening, she told Jack about the Carlsons. His face darkened. I know the type. They'll promise prosperity and deliver destruction. Can we stop them? We can try. The battle for Mercy's Bend's soul played out over several weeks. The Carlsons courted the town council, promising wealth and growth. Jack and Emily countered with warnings about what unchecked development would bring. You want this town to stay small forever? William Carlson asked at a town meeting. You want your children to have no opportunities? I want them to have a home worth living in, Emily replied. Not a town overrun with vice and violence. Listen to the schoolteacher, Carlson said dismissively. What does she know of business? She knows enough, Jack said, standing. And so do I. I've seen what happens when men like you get their hooks into a town. You're not investors, you're parasites. Carlson's smile turned cold. That's slander, Mr. Morgan. It's truth, Mr. Carlson. The vote was scheduled for Friday. The days leading up to it were tense, with the town divided between those who wanted the railroad's prosperity and those who feared its cost. Thursday night, Emily was closing up the school when she heard footsteps behind her. She turned to find the youngest Carlson brother, Eddie, blocking the doorway. Evening, Mrs. Morgan, he said, and his tone made her skin crawl. The school is closed, Mr. Carlson. I'm not here for education. I'm here to deliver a message. Your husband needs to stop interfering with our business. Or what? Eddie smiled, pulling back his coat to reveal a pistol. Accidents happen, even to children. Emily's blood turned to ice, but her voice remained steady. You're threatening my daughter. I'm suggesting that your family's safety depends on your husband's cooperation. Emily's hand found the ruler on her desk, a heavy oak piece. Mr. Carlson, you've made two mistakes. First, you threatened my child. Second, you assumed I was helpless. She moved faster than he expected, the ruler cracking across his wrist. His gun clattered to the floor, and Emily scooped it up, pointing it at him with steady hands. Now, she said calmly, you're going to walk out of here and tell your brothers that the Morgans don't respond well to threats. And if any of you come near my daughter, my students, or this school again, you'll learn that Jack isn't the only Morgan who knows how to shoot. Eddie backed away, cradling his wrist. You'll regret this. The only thing I regret is not hitting you harder. When she told Jack what had happened, his fury was cold and focused. They threatened hope. They won't get the chance to follow through. Jack strapped on his guns the first time Emily had seen him fully armed in months. Stay here. Lock the doors. Jack! They crossed a line, Emily. This ends tonight. But Emily wasn't about to let him face this alone. She bundled Hope and took her to Mrs. Patterson, then retrieved Thomas's Colt from its drawer. She'd stood beside Jack before. She would again. She found him at the saloon facing all three Carlson brothers. The room had cleared patrons, sensing violence coming. Your wife has quite a temper, William Carlson was saying. You haven't seen anything yet, Jack replied. You threatened my child. There's no walking away from that. We're businessmen, Mr. Morgan. We make deals. Perhaps we can come to an arrangement. The only arrangement is you leaving town. Tonight. Don't come back. And if we refuse, Jack's hand moved to his gun. Then we do this the old way. William laughed. 3 against 1. Those aren't good odds even for the famous Jack Morgan. Who said he was alone? Everyone turned. Emily stood in the doorway, gun-drawn, face set with determination. Behind her came Ruby, also armed, then Sheriff Thompson, then half a dozen other townspeople. Seems you miscalculated, Emily said. This isn't some lawless mining camp you can take over. This is our home. We protect it. The Carlsons looked around, seeing guns and resolve in equal measure. William's smile finally faltered. This isn't over, he said. Yes, it is, Jack said. You've got 1 hour to get out of town. If I see any of you again, we'll finish this permanently. The Carlsons left, but Emily knew Jack was right to be wary. Men like that didn't give up easily. They'd be back in some form. The attack came 3 nights later. Emily woke to the smell of smoke, Jack already moving, grabbing his rifle. The school, Emily gasped, seeing the glow through their window. They ran through the streets, finding the school engulfed in flames. The volunteer fire brigade was already working, but it was too late. The beautiful brick building Jack's money had built was dying. Emily stood watching her life's work burn, tears streaming down her face. All those books, those carefully crafted lessons, the children's artwork still on the walls. We'll rebuild, Jack set his arm around her. They did this. The Carlsons. Probably. But we can't prove it. Then what do we do? Jack's jaw set. We rebuild. Bigger, better. We show them they can't break us. The next morning, as Emily stood in the ashes of the school, the town gathered around her. Parents, children, even those who'd initially supported the Carlsons. We'll help, Mrs. Martinez said. My husband, he's good with brick. I can donate lumber, Crawford added. One by one, they offered what they could. The town that had been divided was united, now bound by shared outrage and determination. Within a week, construction had begun on a new school. Jack hired builders from Tucson, sparing no expense. Emily salvaged what she could from the ruins and ordered new books from San Francisco and even New York. During construction, she held classes in the church, refusing to let the children's education stop. Hope played at her feet while she taught, a symbol of continuity and hope. 6 weeks later, word came that the Carlson brothers had been arrested in Tombstone for fraud and intimidation. Their scheme in Mercy's Bend had been one of many, and they'd finally been caught. It's over, Jack said, reading the telegram. No, Emily corrected. It's just beginning. The new school opened on a crisp October morning. It was indeed bigger and better than before, with 3 classrooms, a library, and proper desks shipped from Chicago. The whole town turned out for the dedication. Emily stood before them, Hope in her arms, Jack beside her. "This school stands because we stood together," she said. "It's proof that we can face any challenge if we face it as one." As the children filed into their new classrooms, eager and excited, Emily felt a deep satisfaction. They'd been tested again and again. They'd prevailed. That evening, as they sat on their porch watching Hope play with a wooden horse Jack had carved, Emily said, "Your mother was wrong." "About what?" "She said I wasn't suitable. But we're more than suitable for each other, Jack. We're necessary." He pulled her close. "You're right. We balance each other. Your hope and my caution, your trust and my suspicion, your strength and my stubbornness. I think we're both stubborn." They laughed, and Hope looked up at them with those gray Morgan eyes, giggling at her parents' joy. As the stars emerged, Emily thought about the journey that had brought them here. The widow fleeing east had become a force in her own right. The gunfighter seeking redemption had found it in building rather than destroying. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Hope would grow. The town would continue changing, and they would face whatever came. But tonight, with her daughter playing at her feet and her husband's arm around her, Emily knew they'd already won the only battle that mattered. They'd chosen love over fear, hope over despair, and building over burning. They'd taken a fortune built on hardness and transformed it into something generous. They'd proven that second chances weren't just possible, but powerful. "What are you thinking?" Jack asked. "About that first night, in Skeleton Canyon, how terrified I was. And now I know that fear is just the price of caring about something, and I'd rather be afraid and alive than safe and dead inside." Jack kissed her temple. "My brave Emily. We're both brave. We had to be to build this." A coyote howled in the distance, that wild sound that had once frightened her, then comforted her, and now simply was the voice of the desert reminding them that beauty and danger were eternal partners in this land. Hope stood on unsteady legs, taking a few wobbling steps before falling into Jack's waiting arms. Her laughter rang out like bells, pure and unafraid. "She's going to be something special," Jack said, lifting their daughter high. "She already is," Emily replied. "She's a Morgan woman. We don't do anything halfway." As if in agreement, Hope reached for the stars, her small hands grasping at lights millions of miles away. But in her parents' arms, those stars didn't seem so distant. In their love, anything seemed possible. The new school stood behind them, solid and real, a testament to their refusal to be broken. The money that had once represented everything Jack rejected had become a tool for building something greater than his father ever imagined. The letter arrived on Hope's 5th birthday, just as Emily was frosting the cake she'd spent all morning baking. Jack had taken Hope to see the new foals at the Hendersons' ranch, giving Emily time to prepare for the party. She almost didn't open it, thinking it could wait until after the celebration, but the return address caught her eye. Office of the Territorial Governor, Phoenix. Her hands trembled slightly as she read the official script. The railroad was coming to Mercy's Bend after all, but not in the way the Carlsons had planned. This would be a proper depot with regulations and oversight bringing prosperity without the vice. And they wanted Jack to be the railroad's chief of security for the southern route. Emily set the letter down, her mind spinning. It was an honor, a position that would give Jack authority and respect beyond anything he'd had as a stage guard. But it would also mean danger different from before, but no less real. Train robberies were becoming common, and the men who robbed trains weren't the desperate amateurs who sometimes hit stages. They were organized, ruthless, and well-armed. When Jack returned with Hope, their daughter chattering excitedly about the baby horsies, Emily showed him the letter. She watched his face as he read, saw the conflict in those gray eyes. "It's a good offer," he said finally. But I've been away from danger for 5 years. We have a good life, Emily. Hope has stability. Do I risk that?" Before Emily could answer, Hope tugged on Jack's sleeve. "Papa, are you going to ride the big iron horse Tommy Crawford says they're louder than thunder?" Jack lifted her up, and Emily saw him looking at their daughter with that mixture of love and fear that had never quite left him since her birth. "Maybe, little one," Would you like that? Can I write it too, what? When you're older. That evening, after Hope's party, where half the town had gathered to celebrate Jack and Emily, sat on their porch, discussing the offer. The desert was painting itself in shades of purple and gold, that magical hour when the harsh land turned soft. I think you should take it, Emily said finally. Jack looked at her in surprise. You do? The town's changing, whether we like it or not. The railroad's coming. Better to have you helping shape what that looks like than standing on the sidelines. It'll mean time away, inspection trips dealing with problems along the line. We've handled separation before. That was before Hope. Emily took his hand. Jack, I fell in love with a man who protected people. That's who you are. Yes, I want you safe, but I also want you to be yourself. And Hope needs to see her father as he really is someone who stands between danger and innocence. Jack was quiet for a long moment. You always see me better than I see myself. That's what partners do. He accepted the position, and within a month their lives had shifted into a new pattern. Jack's office was in town, but his duties took him along the rail line that was slowly extending toward them. He was gone 2 or 3 days a week, returning with stories of progress and problems in equal measure. Emily had resumed teaching full-time now that Hope was old enough to attend school herself. It was strange and wonderful having her daughter as a student, watching her quick mind grasp letters and numbers with the same determination she brought to everything. The railroad arrived in Mercy's Bend on a scorching July day. The whole town turned out to watch the first train pull in black smoke billowing against the white-hot sky. Hope sat on Jack's shoulders, her eyes wide with wonder as the massive engine groaned to a stop. It's bigger than our house, she exclaimed. Everything's bigger now, little one, Jack said, but Emily heard the note of concern in his voice. He was right to be concerned. The railroad brought prosperity, but also problems. New people flooded in, some looking for honest work, others looking for easy marks. The town's population doubled in 6 months, and with it came tensions the old Mercy's Bend had never known. The first serious trouble came in September. Emily was teaching when she heard the explosion. The windows of the schoolhouse rattled and several children screamed. Through the window, she could see smoke rising from the direction of the rail depot. Everyone stay calm, she said, though her heart was racing. Miss Ruby's going to take you all to the church. Go quickly, but don't run. Ruby, who'd been helping with the younger children, nodded and began herding them out. Emily grabbed Hope's hand. You go with Miss Ruby. Where are you going, Mama? To help Papa. She ran toward the smoke, finding chaos at the depot. The express car had been blown open, its safe emptied. 3 guards were down, 2 dead and 1 badly wounded. Jack was kneeling beside the wounded man, pressing a cloth to his chest. Dynamite, he said without looking up. Professional job. They knew exactly when we'd be most vulnerable. Inside information. Has to be. His face was grim. Emily, this is going to get worse before it gets better. They got $50,000. That kind of success brings copycats. He was right. Over the next 2 months, there were 3 more attempts on trains near Mercy's Bend. Jack stopped 2 of them, but the third succeeded, though, with less devastating results. The railroad company sent investigators, Pinkerton men, who treated everyone with suspicion, including Jack. They think I might be involved, he told Emily one night, exhaustion evident in his voice. Because I'm the only one who knew all the schedules. That's ridiculous. Is it a former outlaw with access to inside information? It makes sense from their perspective. Emily felt fury rise in her chest. You've given everything to protect this railroad, and they suspect you. It's the nature of the business, Emily. Trust is a luxury they can't afford. The investigation intensified when they discovered that someone in Mercy's Bend was definitely passing information to the robbers. The Pinkertons began interrogating townspeople, their methods increasingly aggressive. When they questioned Ruby roughly enough to leave bruises, Emily had had enough. She marched into their temporary office at the hotel, not bothering to knock. The lead investigator, a man named Harrison, looked up with irritation. Mrs. Morgan, this is a private... You're going to stop terrorizing my town, Emily said flatly. You're going to conduct your investigation with respect for the people who live here, or you're going to leave. Harrison laughed. And what authority do you have to make such demands? The authority of someone who knows every person in this town, their habits, their secrets, their loyalties. You want to find your informant? Stop treating everyone like criminals and start listening. Why should we trust you? Your husband is suspect number one. Emily stepped closer, and something in her eyes made Harrison lean back. My husband has killed 17 men in defense of others. If he wanted to rob trains, he wouldn't need inside information. He'd just do it and you'd never catch him. The fact that these robberies are happening at all proves he's not involved. Unless he's being clever. Mr. Harrison, Jack Morgan doesn't need to be clever. He's fast, he's deadly, and he's honest. Those three things are why the railroad hired him. Now, do you want my help finding your informant, or do you want to keep alienating the only people who can help you? Harrison studied her for a moment. What do you propose? Give me 3 days. Let me ask questions my way. People trust me. They'll tell me things they'd never tell you. And if you find nothing, then you can go back to your bullheaded methods. It took Emily less than 2 days to find the informant. It was Matthew Hensley, the telegraph operator's assistant, a young man with a sick mother and mounting medical debts. He'd been desperate, not evil, but desperation had made him vulnerable to the gang's promises of easy money. Emily found him at his mother's bedside, tears streaming down his face. She's dying, Mrs. Morgan. The medicine costs more than I make in 3 months. What was I supposed to do? You were supposed to ask for help, Emily said gently. The town would have rallied. We always do. I was ashamed. And now I'm ashamed and guilty. He looked at her with haunted eyes. Those guards who died, that's on me. Emily sat beside him. Yes, it is. But what matters now is what you do next. Help us catch them, Matthew. Help us stop them before more people die. Matthew gave her names, locations, plans for the next robbery. Emily took the information to Jack and Harrison, who organized an ambush. The gang walked right into it, expecting an easy score and finding instead a dozen armed men waiting for them. The gunfight was brief but vicious. When the smoke cleared, 5 gang members were dead, 3 captured. Jack had taken a bullet in the arm, but he was standing satisfied that the threat was over. Harrison, to his credit, apologized to Jack. I was wrong about you, Morgan. Your wife, she's something special. I know, Jack said simply. Matthew Hensley was arrested but given a lighter sentence in exchange for his cooperation. The town at Emily's urging raised money for his mother's care. It was what Mercy's Bend did. It looked after its own, even when they stumbled. Winter came early that year, bringing unusual cold that turned the desert into something alien and beautiful. Ice formed on the cacti, making them look like crystal sculptures. Hope had never seen snow before, and when the first flakes fell, she danced in the yard with pure joy. It's like the stars are falling, Mama, she cried, catching snowflakes on her tongue. Emily watched her daughter with a full heart. Hope was growing so fast already, showing signs of the woman she'd become, brave, like her father, stubborn like her mother, but with a joy neither of them had possessed at her age. That evening, as they sat by the fire, Jack reading to Hope from a book of fairy tales, Emily felt a familiar nausea rise. She'd been ignoring the signs for weeks, but now she was certain. She waited until Hope was asleep before telling Jack. I'm pregnant again. Jack's eyes widened, the book falling from his hands. Are you sure? As sure as I was with Hope. He pulled her into his arms, careful and tender. Another baby. Emily, this is wonderful. Are you happy? Happy doesn't begin to cover it. He paused. Are you? Yes. Scared, but yes. We're older now, Jack. There are more risks. We'll face them together, like we always do. The pregnancy was harder than her first. Emily was 38 now, and her body protested the strain. Dr. Harrison confined her to bed rest for the last 2 months, which nearly drove her mad with frustration. I have a school to run, she protested. Ruby and the new teacher can handle it, Jack said firmly. Your job is to keep yourself and our baby safe. Hope appointed herself Emily's helper, bringing her books, keeping her company, telling her about school with the serious intensity of a 6-year-old. Tommy Crawford says babies come from storks, Hope informed her one day, but Sarah Martinez says they grow in gardens, which is true. Mama, Emily smiled. Neither, sweetheart. Babies grow inside their mothers safe and warm until they're ready to be born. Hope considered this. Is that why you're so round? The baby's growing does. Exactly. Will I love the baby? I think so. You have a very big heart, Hope Morgan. The baby came on a wild March night when the wind howled like a living thing. This labor was faster but more intense, and for the first time Emily truly feared she might not survive it. Jack never left her side, his face pale but determined. "Stay with me," he whispered, echoing her words from years ago. "Don't you dare leave me, Emily Morgan." "Wouldn't dream of it." She gasped, then screamed as another contraction tore through her. The baby was born as dawn broke a sun, this time loud and strong from his first breath. Jack wept openly as he held his son for the first time. "What should we name him?" Emily asked, exhausted but euphoric. "Thomas," Jack said without hesitation, "after the man who loved you first, who brought you west where I could find you." Emily felt tears spring to her eyes. "Thomas Jackson Morgan. It's perfect." Hope was enchanted with her brother from the moment she saw him. "He's so small." Was I that small? "Even smaller," Emily told her. "I'll protect him," Hope declared solemnly. "I'll teach him everything." As Emily recovered, she watched her family adjust to its new member. Jack was, if possible, even more protective than he'd been with Hope. He'd walk the floor with Thomas at night, singing old cowboy songs in his rough voice, telling him stories of the desert. The town celebrated the new Morgan with typical enthusiasm. Gifts poured in blankets, toys, enough food to feed them for months. It was their way of showing gratitude for everything Jack and Emily had done for Mercy's Bend. But peace never lasted long on the frontier. When Thomas was 3 months old, word came that a new gang was operating along the southern route, led by a man named Cole Younger. No relation to the famous outlaw, but trading on the name nonetheless. They were hitting payroll trains, timing their robberies perfectly. "Another inside source?" Emily asked when Jack told her. "Maybe. Or maybe they're just that good." He looked troubled. "Emily, they're killing guards even when they don't resist. This isn't about money. It's about terror." The first time the gang hit close to Mercy's Bend, they left 5 men dead, and a message painted in blood on the express car. "Morgan, you're next." Jack wanted to send Emily and the children away, but she refused. "We don't run. That's not who we are." "This is different. They're targeting me specifically, which means they're targeting you." Then we faced them together. The confrontation came sooner than expected. Emily was at home with the children on a quiet Tuesday afternoon when she heard horses approaching. Through the window, she saw 5 men, all armed, with Cole Younger himself in the lead. He was younger than she'd expected, perhaps 30, with cold blue eyes and a scar that ran from ear to chin. Emily loaded Thomas's Colt and Jack's spare rifle, then told Hope to take Thomas to the root cellar. "But Mama, no arguments. You protect your brother. No matter what you hear, you don't come out until Papa or I come for you." Hope's gray eyes, so like Jack's, were frightened but determined. "Yes, Mama." Emily watched her children disappear into the cellar, then faced the door as it exploded inward. Cole Younger stood there, gun drawn, smile cruel. "Mrs. Morgan, where's your husband?" "Working. Where you should be instead of breaking into people's homes." He laughed. "Spirited. I like that. Makes this more fun." "Makes what more fun?" "The lesson I'm about to teach your husband about interfering with my business." Emily raised the Colt smoothly. "The only lesson being taught here is about underestimating a mother protecting her children." "You won't shoot. Good women don't." Emily's shot took his hat off, passing close enough to nick his ear. Blood trickled down his neck. "The next one goes between your eyes," she said calmly. "I've killed men before, Mr. Younger. Don't test me." His smile faded. "You're the one from the Stagecoach, the widow who shot 3 men. 4, actually. The 4th died later from his wounds." "Where are the children?" "Gone. Sent them to town when I saw you coming." The lie came easily. "So it's just you and me." Younger studied her, and Emily saw him calculating. 5 men against 1 woman, but she had cover and determination, and somewhere Jack would have heard the shot. "Boss," one of his men said nervously, "Morgan could be coming." As if summoned by his name, Jack's voice rang out from behind the house. "Younger, let my wife go and we'll settle this between us." "Ah, there's the man of the hour," Younger called back, but his gun never wavered from Emily. "Come on in, Morgan. Join the party." "Let her go first." "No, I don't think so. I think she's exactly where she needs to be." Emily saw Jack appear in the doorway behind Younger, moving silent as smoke. His eyes met hers, and she saw him take in the situation instantly. "You know," Emily said conversationally, keeping Younger's attention on her, "you made the same mistake the Carlson brothers made." "What's that?" "You assumed Jack was the only dangerous one in this family." She dropped to the floor as Jack fired his bullets, taking down 2 of Younger's men before they could turn. Emily rolled, coming up, shooting, catching another in the chest. The room exploded in gunfire splinters, flying smoke filling the air. When it cleared, Younger was on the floor clutching his stomach, his men dead around him. Jack kicked his gun away, then knelt beside Emily. "You hurt?" "No, the children are in the cellar." "I'll get them." As Jack retrieved Hope and Thomas, Emily stood over Cole Younger, who was dying slowly, painfully. "You should have stayed away from Mercy's Bend," she said. "You think. You've won," he gasped. "There'll be others, always others. The railroad brings money. Money brings wolves. Then we'll deal with them too." He laughed, blood bubbling on his lips. "A school teacher and a gunfighter. Against the world. Not against the world. For our corner of it." Younger died as the sheriff arrived, taking in the carnage with a low whistle. 5 against 2. 5 against 1, Jack corrected, holding Thomas, while Hope clung to his leg. They made the mistake of coming after Emily. The story spread through town like wildfire, growing with each telling. The schoolteacher who'd held off 5 outlaws alone protecting her children, fighting beside her husband. It became legend, the kind of story told in saloons and around campfires. But for Emily, sitting that night with her family safe around her, it was just another chapter in their ongoing story. They'd faced death again and chosen life. They'd stood together against violence and won. "Mama?" Hope said, curled against Emily's side. "Were you scared?" "Terrified," Emily admitted, "but you fought anyway." "That's what courage is, sweetheart. Being scared and doing what needs to be done anyway." Hope nodded solemnly, filing this lesson away. Thomas slept peacefully in Jack's arms, unaware of how close he'd come to losing everything before his life had really begun. "We can't keep doing this," Jack said quietly, fighting off every threat. "Eventually we'll lose." "Then what do you suggest?" "I don't know, but something has to change." The change came from an unexpected source. The railroad company, impressed by how Jack and Emily had handled the situation, offered them a different proposition. They wanted Jack to train a new generation of railroad security to build a force that could protect the entire southern route. It would mean less field work, more teaching and organizing. "It's what you do with the children," the railroad executive Mr. Jameson told Emily, except Jack would be teaching men to protect instead of children to read. Emily looked at Jack, saw him considering. It would mean more time at home, less danger, but still useful work. "We'd need a proper training facility," Jack said finally. "We'll build one. Here in Mercy's Bend. Make this town the center of railroad security for the territory." It was perfect, Emily realized. It would bring prosperity to the town, give Jack purpose without constant danger, and let them build something lasting. "Yes," she said, answering for both of them. "We'll do it." The Morgan Security Training Center opened 6 months later, a complex of buildings on the edge of town where Jack taught men from across the territory how to protect trains, passengers, and payrolls. Emily often visited, bringing the children, watching Jack transform from gunfighter to teacher. "You're good at this," she told him one day, watching him demonstrate a defensive technique to a group of eager young men. "I had a good teacher," he replied, smiling at her. "You showed me that knowledge can be more powerful than bullets." Their life found a new rhythm. Jack taught during the day, came home to his family at night. Emily continued teaching the town's children, including her own. Hope showed signs of her father's quick reflexes and her mother's sharp mind, while Thomas, even as a toddler, displayed a gentle nature that seemed at odds with his dramatic entry into the world. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Jack surprised Emily with a trip to San Francisco. They left the children with Ruby and took the train Jack had spent so many years protecting. Standing on the observation deck watching the desert roll by, Emily marveled at how far they'd come. "Do you ever regret it?" Jack asked. "Staying that day, not getting on the eastbound train?" "Never, not for a single moment." "Even with all the danger, the violence?" Emily turned to him. This man who'd been stranger, protector, husband, father, partner. The danger was just the price of the life we built, and that life, Jack Morgan, was worth any price. He kissed her, then, there on the observation deck with the desert wind in their hair and the endless sky above them. The ring on Emily's finger, turquoise and silver, caught the light, as it had so many times before, a symbol of choices made and promises kept.